Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and before I lose all my light because the sun is setting, I am going to try and do a quick video with my 5 book recommendations for your spiritual practice that are not witchy or spiritual books. Okay, so none of these books that I'm going to talk about today are technically spiritual or witchcraft or tarot or any of those things. A couple of them are, of course, a little adjacent, but none of them are technically within that category. And here's why I'm doing this book list. Because when we are looking for ideas and inspiration and information and all that stuff on our path, we look to spiritual or witchy books or whatever. That's great. Keep doing that. But there's actually a lot of great stuff out there that can genuinely impact your practice that aren't within that genre. So I want to talk about those quick. All right, so first we're going to talk about this book, Atomic Habits. This is by James Clear. So Atomic Habits, Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. So this book is all about habits. It is about the psychology of behavior, the psychology of learning, as it applies to creating habits. Now, I know a lot about behavior change and a lot about psychology and a lot about learning theory. This is a really good book that's easy to digest. The reason it's on this list, this would be the number 1 book that's on this list. I probably should have done it last, that's fine. Is because so much of having a successful spiritual practice is actually rooted in the mundane. It's rooted in developing good habits, in creating spiritual practices that work for you, that work with your life, that work with your routines, that work with all of that stuff. I have a whole video coming out in the next couple of weeks about that, psychology hacks for your spiritual practice. And I have a video called creating a spiritual practice that works for you, where we talk about this stuff. But yes, all the spiritual stuff, all of that stuff is really important. But in order to have a successful spiritual practice, it has to be rooted in the mundane and it has to work for you. This book can really help you understand, if you're somebody who struggles with that aspect of a spiritual practice, which I am. This book can really help you with that. It can really help you to create the habits that you want in your spiritual practice so that your spiritual practice can create the change in your life that you are looking for. All right, so the next one we'll talk about is Do Less by Kate Northrup. Now, this book talks a lot about work, being an entrepreneur, but there's also a lot of stuff in here just about cycle syncing, living a cyclical life, which if you are a bleeding woman, if you are somebody who identifies as a woman, if you are very in tune with the moon cycles, which she talks about in this book, or if you are very in tune with living cyclically, regardless of how you identify gender-wise, this book is really, really powerful for that. So this book also, this is one of my probably most life-changing books because I read it because I was an entrepreneur. And it was kind of like an opening of the door. I read this before I read Mary Magdalene Revealed, and it was kind of like an opening of the door into other things for me. So this book talks about things like, if you are a bleeding woman or a bleeding person, the hormones in your body change over the course of 4 weeks. And what you're really good at during each phase of that cycle changes because your brain changes and your hormones change. And at certain points in your cycle, you're more intuitive. And other points, you're more detail-oriented. And by getting in tune with that cycle, whatever that looks like for you, you can live life in an, I don't want to say easier, but a more in the flow kind of way. And I think that our spiritual practice is very easy to be it needs to be daily and it needs to be this and it needs to be that. And we try to rigid it and make it this rigid thing that we do every day the exact same way, which is a very masculine type of an energy, right? Which there's nothing wrong with. But for some of us, that's not going to work. And we're always going to feel like we're failing. This book is really good for that. Now, along the lines of that is In the Flow by Alyssa Vitti. This one is very much specifically about the menstrual cycle, how it changes your body, cycle syncing, and living in that flow. So it's kind of like a health book. But essentially, you guys, this is biohacking for women or for people with female hormones. Okay, this is that's what this is. So this book, not only can it help you if you are dealing with like PMS problems or anything in that field, if you're trying to live a healthier life, but when we, again, root into our bodies and we heal our bodies, whatever that looks like for us, and we befriend our bodies, whatever that looks like for us, again, our spiritual practices, yes, they're like to take us out there onto the astral, to talk to our guides, to like be a priestess and a channel or a tarot reader or whatever. Yes, but you do all of that in your physical body, rooted in your physical body and in the mundane. And these two books, Do Less and In the Flow, if you are either Do Less for anybody who identifies with cyclical living, the moon cycles, that type of thing, and Alyssa Vidi's book for anybody who does have a menstrual cycle. Now, let's move away from that topic. And let's do this one next. So this is the only one on this list that I haven't actually read all the way through. I'm about halfway through, but I feel comfortable saying this anyway. This is Jung's Map of the Soul. Now, of course, with all of these books that I'm mentioning, like there's a little bit of overlap into like the woo-woo spirituality and Do Less, right? And of course, if you know anything about Jung, there's a lot of overlap here. But this is not a book like for spiritual practitioners. This is a book about Jung's work. Now, this was recommended to me by a mentor. This book is a really easy introduction to Jung's theories, to the ego, the shadow, all of these kinds of things. So this book is a really accessible way into Jung's work. And if you are on a spiritual path, again, we can be as spiritual as we want and as high vibe as we want, and we are still going to be human, which means we have a human body, Do Less in Alyssa Vidi's book. We have human behavior, Atomic Habits. We have a human psyche, okay? And yes, we are also these divine spiritual beings, but we are living in a human body with everything that that entails. So this book can help you if you want to understand Jung's work, what the shadow is, what the ego is. Like, I think it's broken down that way even. Yeah, so egos, complexes, psychic energy, which he doesn't necessarily mean psychic the way we might understand it, but his idea of psychic, the psyche's boundaries, so instincts, archetypes, collective unconscious, all of these kinds of things. This is a really good intro into Jung's work. Now, Jung himself, emergence of the self, so individuation, synchronicity, all these things. Jung himself was had problematic stuff. But this is a good book. This is not written by Jung, but this is a really good book on Jung's work. Okay, I'm trying to keep this video short. So, on to the next book. None of you will be surprised if you have watched any of my recent videos. On Our Best Behavior by Elise Lohanen. We are human. We live in a human society. We have human families, which means if we don't do the work, if we don't do what Jung would call individuation or what we're calling shadow work, if we don't deconstruct, if we don't understand where our worldview came from and what it actually entails, we aren't looking at the world through our worldview. We're looking at it through the worldview that was given to us by our religion or our family or our society, because we are human and we live in a human society. This book is really, really great. It's about religious conditioning. So the subtitle is The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Paid to Be Good. It's one of my most highly recommended books of 2023. Of my big books for deconstruction. You know that it's recommended reading for my upcoming program, Reclaiming Eve. We start in January. All the information is below. It goes through the 7 deadly sins, the history of the 7 deadly sins, how they have really, just gotten so deep into the collective unconscious that she says in here, something along the lines of, to be alive is to engage with them. If you live in a Western society, the 7 deadly sins affect you. I don't care how spiritual you are or how highly ascended you are. If you live in a human society, these things affect you. And if you haven't gone through the work to deconstruct it so you know how it is affecting you, and then they're just affecting you blindly. So, On Our Best Behavior, one of my top books of all time. So if you could only have one book on this list, it would go in this order: On Our Best Behavior and Atomic Habits, followed by the other 3. So those are my top 5 non-witchy, non-spiritual books for your spiritual practice. If you have books that fall in this category, I would love to hear about them below. I know folklore is another big category that people look to for their witchcraft and spiritual practices. So we have like witchy books, we have occult books, we have tarot books, spiritual books, religion books, kind of folklore, right? Those are like the ones that we go to the most. So these are the books I was trying to get outside of that I really, really think, I really believe can have a huge impact on your spiritual practice. So if there's anything you'd like to hear me talk more about, put it in the comments below. If you have books you would love, like that you would put on a list like this, put them in the comments below. If you want any information on my upcoming group shadow work program, Reclaiming Eve, that information is at the link below. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.